Hello guys, welcome to the show. It's your boy, Your Truth will set you free. Hashtag SFTS, search for the symbols. I want to give a shout out to all my supporters, everybody who subscribed, everybody who hit that like button, everybody who leave me comments. I thank y'all, I appreciate y'all so much, and thank y'all for your support. There's no me without you, and I cannot express it enough.
What's up, guys? It's your boy, Your Truth will set you free. It's no me without you. I came today because I wanted to prove that George Washington was black. A lot of our people in history have been whitewashed. If you look at the pictures, they painted all over the black people to make their skin look whiter and their hair look white. So I just want to make it clear as much as I can. It's a part of my new content that I'm going to be doing, that I want to talk more about history and open up the eyes of our people. So we're going to get into these books about George Washington, primary sources, primary accounts of people who've seen him during the time when he was alive, and how they described him and how they say he looked. All right, this is George Washington, a biography. Reading from where I got it, where the colors are. Van Horn pointed him out and to secure all his papers. Van Horn's description was fairly specific and might be useful. The man who inquired about the letter was tall, dark, with a red coat and a sword, and appeared to be a stranger. London had then to attempt to identify Pierre Fidel on the basis of Van Horn's description, added to what the traitor had said casually in his letter of himself and of his military position. What tall, dark officer was there in America, 38 years of age, unmarried, who had an aide camp and was going to participate in an expedition against Fort Dequeque? The only officer who was known to Lord London's informants in any way answering to this description was Colonel Washington. All right, so right here they describe him as a tall, dark man. That means that he was a dark-skinned person, That's how they described him in his time, and that's how he looked. He was a dark man. All right, this is another excerpt from the biography of George Washington. London consequently asked Kennedy for a description of the Virginian. Speaking of Washington, Washington said the captain was a man about 6 feet high, of black complexion, with black hair, which he then wore a bag. Looks like a foreigner, a strong man. So they say Washington was a Moor, so that's why they say he looks like a foreigner. But if he looked like the regular black man, why would they call him a foreigner? He obviously has a distinct face that doesn't look like everybody else's face. That's why they say he's a foreigner or a strong man. Because, he's a strong man, but he looked like a foreigner and he had black complexion. You can't confuse black complexion. This is another excerpt. A British officer who met Washington some years later reported that he had a dark complexion and a foreign look. This is another primary source, an eyewitness who's described Washington as a dark complexion person. Nobody calls a white person a dark complexion. Nobody says, even if you're white, nobody says, oh, he has a dark complexion. Because George Washington was a black man. He was a dark person. He was a black man just like me and you. Okay, this is an excerpt from George Washington Bicentennial Celebration. George Washington, at different periods of his life and under varying circumstances, one of the earliest of this depicts a handsome youth of 19, full height, 6 feet 2 inches, slender blue eyes and abundance of brown hair and a clear, ruddy complexion. All right, ruddy means red color, lively, flesh color, you red, like, the copper-colored people of America. You have red skin, brown people, they have red skin. Their skin is red. So George Washington was a ruddy complexion. This is an excerpt from the Virginia colonial soldiers. These are description of George Washington's soldiers during the Revolutionary War. As you can see, they have the description and a name and the age and where they're from. This proves black Europeans. Reuben Vass, Essex, Virginia, dark complexion. James Littlepage, carpenter from Virginia, fair. I guess that means white, fair. Charles Stringman, carpenter from New York, ruddy complexion. James Campbell, a drummer from Scotland, ruddy complexion. That means he's a black man. Jeremiah Puckett, drummer, planter from Virginia, fair complexion. Samuel Longworth from New Jersey, dark complexion. Simon Robinson, bricklayer from England, fair complexion. John Pope, Prince William, planter from Virginia, dark complexion. John Trigg, Queen and King from Virginia, brown complexion. All right, so these proves that George Washington had brown and black soldiers in his army. Most of the soldiers that was in George Washington's army was the same color as him, ruddy and brown and dark complexion. The same way that they describe him, they was the same complexion as him. So this proves it. This is two more pages from the same book. If you look at the green, that's where it says complexion. If you look at the yellow, that's where it says brown, red, and ruddy. And the blue is where they're from. England, Ireland, because there were black people in Europe coming over here. So this book just proves this is the real muster rolls from the soldiers that was in George Washington Army. As you can see, most of them were brown, ruddy, brown-skinned people, majority Europeans. All right, this is to show the family ties of George Washington. These are people who moved on from George Washington. This is a man named George Washington Bush. He was a soldier and a trapper. And he got married. He moved to the Northwest. He moved to Missouri. All right. He married a girl who was the daughter of a German Baptist minister. At this time, Germans were black too. Germans were dark-skinned. So he married a black girl who was German. All right. This guy, he had money to be a soldier and a trapper. He learned how to be a soldier just like George Washington was a soldier and a trapper. He knew how to live out in the wild. He said when he was headed on the Oregon Trail, he'll watch when he get to Oregon to see how they treat people of color. If he can't have free man's right, he'll go to California, New Mexico. Obviously, he had money to move around and go wherever he wanted to because he's from the George Washington family. All these guys with the George Washington name, they were related to George Washington. They were his kin. They didn't just have that name for no reason. Every time they put George Washington, that's to tie you to the family name, to the bloodline, to let people know who you are, that you are a prominent person, that you're like a gentleman, and that your family has money and respect. All right, this is the other George Washington right here. He went by straight George Washington. This is one of George Washington's sons who he adopted because he didn't have kids. All right. He was born in Virginia, right where Washington was from. Okay, I guess he moved to the Northwest. I think this is the guy who started Washington State. All right, they moved to Ohio, to the backwoods of northern Missouri. All right, he had a lot of skills that he learned since they so-called black people couldn't go to school at this time. But he was a black person that had money and from a prominent family. He became an expert rifleman at 10 years old. Who knows how to shoot a rifle perfectly at 10 years old? That's because of the family he comes from. He knew how to cook, sew, and knit. All right, he was taught these things because he's from a prominent family. By 10 years of age, he made his own shirts, pants, and socks. But he knew how to sew and make clothes and all of that. That's because he's from a prominent family. He's a George Washington. All right, he knew how to read the Bible. He knew how to read and all that. But Missouri law forbids blacks from attending school. But he knew everything he needed to know in school, though. Somehow, how did that happen? He was born in Virginia. They say he was the son of a slave and an English woman, a so-called slave. A lot of times, slaves was your wife. You know, like a slave was your family member. Like a lot of people who was working, they was called slaves, but they was family members. He said his father was sold shortly after birth. I don't know about this story, but his mother gave him to a white couple, Anna and James Cochran, and they made him his foster child. But obviously, he's from a good family. That's how he had money too. He ended up owning properties, and that's how he moved around. He moved to Ohio. He ended up getting land, 650 acres. So George Washington, he had money because he wasn't George Washington. All these guys named George Washington, their name is not George Washington for no reason. It's because they're from the George Washington family, and it just so happens that all of them are black, melanated people. Look how black this man is. All right, why we just have the same name, George Washington? He had all these skills to cook, sew, knit, shoot. He could do all those things at a young age. All right, but he never went to school. But I think he had schooling in the home. You know, they taught him this stuff because he's from a prominent family. They made sure he was all right. He taught himself to read. He knew how to read. So, you know, they definitely had somebody teach him how to read because he's a George Washington. He's from a prominent family. So I just want to prove that, you know, George Washington was a black person. He had black family members. Look, he was extraordinary gifts in mathematics, mostly in his head. So he knew how to do math over the top of his head. He didn't learn that from anywhere. He didn't learn that from being in the farm. He grew up in a good household who taught him these things. And this is how he was good at mathematics. This is how he got this intelligent. He's so-called given full citizen rights by a special Missouri exemption. The special Missouri exemption was that he was a George Washington. He was from a prominent family. That's how he got full citizen rights. That's why they didn't treat him like a regular black person. He was a George Washington. He had the bloodline. That's where he's from. He started a sawmill, other businesses. He had more than one business. He was frustrated with the laws, but they didn't particularly discriminate on him because he was a George Washington. Okay? The George Washington family is very prominent. And if you connected to that bloodline, you would have certain rights that a regular black person would have. You would have, you know, your life would be better. You know, he went on the Oregon Trail in 1850. He took his family. I mean, he was a very popular person in the neighborhood. And he got really cool with the Indians. There was a lot of laws that was stopping regular black people from doing things, but that wasn't the case for everybody. Like, they always try to put that in the story, but that wasn't the case for everybody. He staked the squatters' claim. He was cool with the Shukimchuk and Caucasus. You know what I mean? He was cool with the Native Americans. You know, he learned his things from being from the George Washington family. Look, he established friendship with the natives who called him Nokless, blackface. All right? So all the skills that the George Washington had, George Washington was good with the natives. This is another George Washington Williams, an historian, you know, a hero who exposed King Leopold's benevolent enterprise in Congo. But it just so happens he has the George Washington name too. And all these guys are prominent. All these guys did something special in history. His name is just not George Washington for no reason. This is George Washington Carver, the Peanut Man. All right, this is another George Washington who did a lot in history. Trust me, he's from that family line. That's why they have the name George Washington. They just changed the last name. All right, this is George Washington Francis. This is another prominent black man. Look at him in his nice suit. He's looking, you know, he's looking nice and suited and booted because George Washington was a prominent family. And people lived on after him and carried on his name. That's why there's so many George Washingtons out there. All right. This is Alexander Hamilton. These are the founding fathers, because the founding fathers were melanated. They were black people. This is in Philadelphia, and they have them all melanated. All the founding fathers, they have them melanated statues of the founding fathers. And that's just crazy because most of them were melanated and they really look like this. And it's crazy how they have statues of them like this in Philadelphia because this is how they really look. A lot of European black dudes, they had the, you know, some of them have blue eyes and slick hair, you know, but they were still melanated, dark-skinned people. This is just crazy how I found this. And this is a very good depiction of the founding fathers. These are all of them, and they all are brown and melanated because this is how they really looked. This is how they really looked in the 1700s and the 1800s because they were melanated people. So I hope this opened up your eyes, guys. I hope you guys understand that George Washington was a black man. Obama was not the first black president. Alexander Hamilton was black. All these guys were black. Most of the founding fathers, most of the presidents before George Washington too, they were black also. Moors and black Europeans, they try to act like black people who didn't come from Europe. All right. This is a despicable picture of George Washington. That's not how he looked. All right, he was a dark-skinned person. Okay. I hope this opened up your eyes, guys. This is the first segment of my new content, which I'll be doing. So, yeah, he looked more like this. I hope you guys appreciate the content. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe. And please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I know it's hard to believe, but I know it's going to be very hard for people to swallow this, but George Washington was black. All right. Please like, please subscribe. Please leave a comment. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for stopping by. You could be anywhere, but you're here with me.